Welcome to the fourth installment of Motion Sickness STL. I'm going to talk today about the fourth issue that was released in spring of 97. I went from 48 pages to 64 pages. I had 11 interviews. And without further ado, let's get right to issue 4. First band, Dillinger 4 from Minneapolis. I'd heard about these guys. I read about them. They had played a basement show, and Matt Detox, who now called himself Matt is the Bastard, had interviewed them in his zine Off the Beaten Path. So I was psyched to see them, and they came and played Hi-Pointe on March 29th in 97. And they blew me away. They were great. They were fun. They were kick-ass. They're everything they are now still. They're the same dudes. I talked to Patrick Costello, their bass player, right after their set. We sat down, and as soon as I hit record, he just... and it was hilarious. Yeah, we talked about everything. Their first album was supposed to be on a label called Far Out Records, which was the guy from Against All Authority, the ska band from Florida. That was his label. It was supposed to be out on that, but it came out on Hopeless. And I don't know if there was a bidding war or anything, but Hopeless was a great label. It was a good underground label. First thing we talked about was ska, and he said it had nothing to do with punk. It was 15-year-olds in suits playing carnival music. And then he started going off on the baggy pants thing, and he's like, the only person that's allowed to wear baggy pants is Jimmy Percy from Sham 69 because he used to be fat and he's too poor to buy new pants. Anybody else? No baggy pants. So he was on a fucking roll. I was just cracking up. I barely had to talk, and it was a great interview. So anyway, I mentioned that he and Eric, they're the singer, guitarist, heartthrob of the band, were from Chicago. They moved to Minneapolis and started the band with Lane. And then Billy came in. Billy was in a band called Scooby Don't. And that's when they became a 4-piece. And what else? I asked him why they left Chicago. And he's like, what do you think? And he said, every band in Chicago, they just come out and they go, this next song's about my girlfriend. So they didn't fit in. They wanted to get the hell out. So they got the hell out, you know. And then, oh, God, man, I should put that interview up because it's just stand-up comedy. So he talked for a while. There's a lot more in here, and I even cut out a bunch. So I need to go back and listen to that tape. And I went downstairs, and then Billy and Lane came downstairs, and I interviewed them some and talked to Lane about their 7-inch that had come out on Cerebellum Records and had sold out, and they weren't getting it repressed, and the guy never did any advertising or anything. And he was talking about certain people in the scene that start a label just to get the scene cred, but don't want to, do, I did a zine, or people that do a zine. Not me. But anyway, it's just weak, and I was 30 at the time, so I understood it. Now, an 18-year-old kid might not understand it. They were great. They like to drink. They're fun. They're Midwest. Midwest punk's the best. Sorry. I mean, talk about first impressions. Dillinger 4. If you don't know Dillinger 4, they're still playing out. They're still doing shows, and they just played Chicago a couple of weeks ago. And the whole show was up on YouTube for one night. I came home from seeing the Melvins, and I couldn't go to sleep, and I turned it on, and there's D4 playing Reggie's, and Eric was hammered, and I'd never seen Eric hammered. So that was awesome. Patty was the one steering the ship. Everybody was pounding beers in between every song, so I bet they had fun that day and that night. And I wish they'd come back to St. Louis just one more time. Just one more time. I'd like to remember a show. I'm sober now. Anyway, if you don't know Dillinger 4 from Minneapolis, there's this thing called Google and Spotify and Discogs and, whatever. So check them out. Check them out. There's a reason I put them first. You open the page, there's a few ads. Dillinger 4. I'm going to shut up now. After that, I threw in some columns. Another column by Carissa, who did Screams from the Inside zine. And Matt Detox changed his name to Matt is the Bastard, and he did another column. And I met a new friend, and her name was Felisa, and she did a column. And then I did a column. I don't know where Jameson's column was. There was no column from Tim Jameson this issue. He was missing in action. Boom, on to the next interview. There was a band from the Berkeley East Bay area called Screw 32. Kind of sounded like AFI meets Dag Nasty meets the Bouncing Souls. I don't know. That's what fucking someone else said. But the drummer used to be in Sam I Am, and the guys were kind of in a bunch of different bands around that area, but they put out an album on Wingnut, and then they got signed to Fat Mike's side label, Honest Don's. And they were putting out a full length on that. And I got a call from the label. I talked to the labels back then. That was great. You know, remember telephone? Ring, ring. That was before internet. Before email was barely starting. It was dial-up shit for computer. So they would call me, the labels. I'd get home. They'd call me, see if I got the CDs in the mail. Lookout, Nitro, Fat, Honest Don's, Epitaph. Shout out to all those people. Vanessa at Fat, Andrea at Nitro, Jeff at Epitaph. Yeah, name dropping. I got a call from them asking if I could put on a show or somehow arrange a show, because Screw 32 were driving out to DC from fucking California to hook up with the Queers to do a tour, and they asked if I could set up a show so they have somewhere to play halfway across to make a little money. I said, sure. Set them up a show at the Hi-Pointe, and then right away I got a call from Lookout asking if I could get the Groovy Ghoulies on that show, because they were driving out to Washington to get on the same tour with the Queers. And I was like, sure. So now I was doing my first show. I was doing a zine. Now I'm doing a show. Fuck it. I worked at the bar. I didn't really have to pay rent. I just had to pay sound, you know, and got the Paxadills and Sirhan to open. And everybody got paid and they sold merch. And I think it was a really good show. So anyway, I was talking about their first album. The first album was on Wingnut Records. That was a local label by a kid in the East Bay area, and it was called Unresolved Childhood Issues. They also had a split with Youth Brigade. Let me see. The new album was, the second one was called Under the Influence of Bad People. And they had to turned down a tour of Europe with Good Riddance for some reason, and it was supposed to be initially Lifetime was supposed to tour with Good Riddance in Europe, but they canceled it because they broke up. And that's how I found out Lifetime broke up, talking to Screw 32. That's how we found shit out in the Midwest in the 80s and 90s, because either zines or just talking to people. So yeah, you wonder why we're 10 years behind? You know, fuck, give us a break. They went out and they did that tour, and they came back through, and that tour played the Galaxy, and they stayed with me, and we got fucked up and went out, and man, that's a whole nother story, because I hadn't smoked pot in years, and they had the chronic, and I took a hit, started walking out with them, and it was like, I went back to my buddy's apartment, fell down on the floor in between his bed and the wall, and I was out till 7 in the morning when they came back. All fucking wasted, so I don't even know where they went. But yeah, that was a fun night. They had a 2-album deal with Honest Don's, but the second album never came out. Never heard anything about him again. I know Andrew, the vocalist, went on to be in Hope Lifter and a bunch of other bands. Doug, the guitarist, one of the guitarists, went on to start a band called Limp, which is the weakest fucking name ever. I don't care if you're a rock band, rap band, punk band. Why don't you call it Flaccid? I mean, you trying to... I don't get it. That's one I gave a bad review without listening to. Sorry, dude, you called your band Limp. Also, Jimmy Cheetah was the bass player there, and you might know Jimmy Cheetah because he also played in Tilt, which was a great Berkeley band. So anyway, and Grant, the other guitarist, Grant, the other guitarist, and Mark, the drummer, went on to be in a band you might know called Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. So there's your history lesson from this Midwest guy. I decided to do a scene report. Man, I thought about this one. Because it's like you're setting yourself up. You're going to say something someone's not going to agree with. And then high school. But I did anyway. I did a bunch of bands. I don't know how many. I'm looking at them now. Cakewalk, which Mike Lake was in, and he passed away around this time. Right about when this issue started, I think. I'll get back to that. Cakewalk, El Gordo's Revenge, Full-Fledged Ledge, Last Year's Youth, Ruined, The Paxadills, Sirhan, or Sirhan, I don't fucking know. Twisted Media, The Volatiles, Very Metal, Whippersnapper. Volatiles had a 7-inch coming out, and then they broke up. Very Metal had a second 7-inch coming out on Beer City Records. Then they got signed to Beer City and put out 2 full lengths. But Josh left the band. And that was the last of the original Very Metal. That second 7-inch on Beer City. Oh, the original Very Metal. So good. Twisted Media did like a couple shows and broke up. Sirhan, couple shows and broke up. Paxadills, we'll get back to that later. Ruined, I don't know how long that lasted. They lasted for a while. Put out a CD, maybe 2, I don't know. Last Year's Youth wound up signing with Gimme My Money Records out of Atlanta, and I think doing a 7-inch and maybe a CD. Full-Fledged Ledge put out a 7-inch and broke up. I know because they were my friends, and my other friends paid for that 7-inch, and they probably have a box of them sitting somewhere. And El Gordo's Revenge were working on their 10-inch, and we'll get back to them. And then, back to Cakewalk. So all those bands, I wrote about them, and most of them broke up, which is what I thought would happen. So anyway, that was the scene. They were all good. We had a good scene, though. Everybody was friendly. Kind of, never any violence. Yeah, other than the Very Metal riot. But fuck, that was great. Anyway, excuse me. This episode is sponsored by my band, Whoppers Taste Good. Got an album coming out soon. Next is the Volatiles. The Volatiles. Yeah, I interviewed Jason Useless. I believe he was the bass player. They played the Hi-Pointe. I'm not sure of the date, but it was early 97. And I really wanted to talk to these guys, and he wanted to talk to me, and blah, blah, blah. I wish Dwayne would have got in on it, because Dwayne, I don't know. I kind of knew Dwayne best, their drummer. Anyway, Jason was very young. He was 22 years old, and he already had a 6-month-old baby girl. And he just got the gig to be a columnist at Maximum Rock and Roll. So I was curious about that. I was like, what kind of tests did you have to pass to get Tim Johannen's seal of approval? And, he said he had to write, I don't even know, Tim Johannen might have been dead by then. Good question. I don't think Tim Johannen was dead by early 97. Anyway, rest in peace, Tim Johannen. You did a lot. Back to the Volatiles. He had to send in a few columns to prove that, he was consistent. Remember that word. That's a lot of syllables. We talked about touring, because they did the old put out a 7-inch and go do a shitty tour and don't make no money. Like, it's fun. You can only do it when you're young. Talked about promoters that set up shows. Yeah, I got a show set up, and you roll into town and some kid, and I don't have a PA. Can you sing through my stereo? And had good intentions, but caused more harm than good. Again, probably getting back to that scene cred thing. Yeah, I'm putting on a show. Oh, I tell all the kids at school. None of the kids showed up. And then we talked about the fragmentation in the scene, which again, in retrospect, talking about a scene is kind of just fucking naive. But anyway, we'll get back to that. I'll get on my fucking soapbox. But they had a 7-inch out on Rocco, a label out of Chicago. So they were on a real label. They didn't put their own fucking, Anyway, and they had an LP on the way, which they broke up. But many moons later, that album got released by Don, the original bass player of Very Metal, who has a record store in St. Louis now called The Record Space. And if you like punk rock, you might want to go by there when you're in town. And Don's been putting out, he put out a Fear 7-inch or a 12-inch. He's done some re-release shit. And he put out this album, 200 copies, and you can get it down at the Record Space. And it's fucking the Volatiles. It's punk rock. They fucking Dillinger 4 loved the Volatiles. They toured with them. They took them on the road. That's all I got. That's all you need to know. Anyway, look them up. And next, fucking Motorhead. Motorhead, 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 Motorhead. Fuck yeah. That's, by the way, if you didn't know, Motorhead's my second favorite band. Besides Black Sabbath. Sorry, I'm old. But fucking Motorhead, the original crossover band. Are you kidding me? You want to argue? I'll fight you. Anyway, I got an interview with Motorhead. My friend Rodney did a video interview with them up in Chicago, and I was glad to use it and borrow it and whatever the fuck with it. Anyway, he sat down with Lemmy and Mickey D, their drummer. God, fucking how cool would that be? That's one person I would be starstruck in front of, is Lemmy. I'd be... Anyway, he had all their... every album up till then. They had just released their album Overnight Sensation. Now they were back to being a three-piece with just him, Mickey, and Lemmy, Mickey, and Phil Campbell. Wurzel had left the band, and me personally, I think some of the best records are after Wurzel, not after Wurzel left, but they did a couple stinkers with Wurzel. They didn't do no stinkers with Phil. I don't know. We'll get into that later. He sat down and he had every album that Motorhead has released in order, and he just had Lemmy and Mickey say a little comment about this, that, and the other thing. And he started with the last Hawkwind record, which had the song Motorhead on it. And Lemmy immediately corrected him and said something like, no, that song didn't come out on that record, but it came out on the importer. I don't forget. You'll have to read the article, because my brain ain't working right now. I smoked a big fatty with the producer's wife. They were on the Overnight Sensation tour. I already said that. But, so he threw down the first album, second album, and, it's like, it's great hearing what Lemmy has to say, and Rodney's like, all right, the big one, Ace of Spades. And Lemmy's like, no, that wasn't the big one. The big one was No Sleep Till Hammersmith. That's the one that debuted at #1 on Billboard. Again, Lemmy, fucking history lesson. It was great. And then he got to Iron Fist, and he said that's one of his least favorite Motorhead records of all time, which was very interesting because that's when Fast Eddie produced it. There's 2 guitars on that album, even though it's a single guitar. So Lemmy wound up just playing kind of bass on that instead of rhythm guitar bass. If you know Motorhead, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know what I'm talking about. I love Iron Fist, but he said there were some songs on there that are pretty weak that he, in retrospect, so all that. But talked about 1916. Oh, talked about what a great album it was, and then they talked about what a horrible label it was. So they kept getting signed to labels, and label put it out, and then the label would go bankrupt. So there's no promotion, no tour support. Meanwhile, whoever had all their back catalog would release a greatest hits CD every time they put a new album out. And that fucking greatest hits CD with Ace of Spades on it would outsell the new record. Kind of like what Warner Brothers did to Black Sabbath. Then we talked about the album Sacrifice. And he goes, no comment. And I'm like, Sacrifice is great. And then he talked about March or Die. And he said, that's one of our best because, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's the album with, they do a cover of Cat Scratch Fever by Ted Nugent. And it's horrible. March or Die is like probably my least favorite Motorhead record. There's like 4 stinkers on there. I'm sorry. I know it's blasphemy, but I reread this article. I was like, ooh, he's like, Iron Fist, stop, Sacrifice, stop. But, In retrospect, I just went back and listened to those records. Sacrifice kicks fucking ass. March or Die, half and half. What kicks ass though, Overnight Sensation's a great fucking record too. And just about every record after that until they passed. I got Motorhead in my zine. You know what? That's a fucking score. I could have stopped then. I could have just made this like 30 pages and it would have been good. It would have been gold. Proud to have Motorhead in my zine. Thank you, Rodney, in Chicago. Hopefully I will see you in a couple months when I go up and see Iron Maiden for my 60th birthday. I told you I'm fucking old. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go smoke a fatty with the producer's wife, and I'll be right back. Cheers, you lot.